7 of the last 10 debt ceilings have carried something else. What the Speaker and I are advocating here is not unusual. It's more common than not. A perfect example of it is the Congressional Review Acts that we've been voting on periodically in Congress to overturn was done on a debt ceiling during the Clinton administration. So this shouldn't be this hard. Number one, we know we're not going to default. They know it, we know it. We're running out of time. And just finally, as the speakers pointed out, the president's agreed to designate somebody to be the lead, as I recommended to President Trump in 2019 when we faced the same situation. Do you think he wanted to negotiate with Speaker Pelosi? Of course not. I said, you have no choice.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Can you talk about your discussions during the meeting on the work requirements? Are you just discussing TANF changes now, or is Medicaid SNAP requirements still on the table?
Look, I'm not going to negotiate with all of you. We know where we need to get to. We know what bill we have passed. Look, the way the founders have developed this country, which is an unbelievable country, you lend your voice to your elected officials. The House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill, and then you go to conference. Unfortunately, the House is the only body that has passed the bill and raised the debt limit. We are now 15 days away from hitting this limit. Republicans didn't sit back and wait till Janet Yellen told us when the deadline was. We passed it long before she ever said June 1st was coming, because we didn't want to put America into jeopardy like this. And so we have worked to try to solve the problem. Just as you looked at Title 42 being lifted on the border, we didn't ignore the problem like the White House. We actually put a border control bill out there so we could secure our borders. And what happened this weekend? A person on the terrorist watch list from Afghanistan was just coming across this border. Why? You know, we caught more people in the month of February on the terrorist watch list than we caught the entire time of the last administration. You can't keep ignoring problems. You got to find solutions. And that's what the Republicans in the House have done. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. What do you tell the world who is looking at you now and concerned about possible default and the implications in the global economy?
Look, I think America is the #1 economy in the world, and when we get done with this negotiations, America's economy is going to be stronger, because we're going to make the American economy stronger by putting more people back to work, lifting them out of poverty, lowering our energy costs, and more importantly, curving our spending at the runaway. So as the world looks around and look back at America, said they were spending too much, they won't be able to say that when we're done. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
There you go. Not much progress made for the roughly 15-minute meeting or thereabouts that was in the Oval Office that featured some of the top congressional leaders and, of course, the Speaker of the House, President of the United States. They didn't really make much progress on this. There is some development that maybe the president wants to try to angle to make progress by cutting short his trip to Asia. He will only go to Japan for the G7 summit, and he has skipped out on adding Australia and Papua New Guinea to that. They are far apart, it would seem, on some of the core issues, including what Republicans hope will be a work requirement for those receiving federal benefits. Not all, but able-bodied men and women. It says that they hope will at least get back to something we saw in the days of President Clinton and Newt Gingrich. That did not seem to be in the offing here. Joaquin Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, was dead set against that as a non-starter proposal. Democrats are now coming out to say where they think things stand. Chuck Schumer is among those. Joaquin Jeffries, of course, I just mentioned, is not too keen on some of these work requirements. Let's see what they have to say.
Chuck Schumer. Situation for America and America's families. But we also agreed that we need to pass a bipartisan bill with bipartisan support in both chambers. I asked Speaker McCarthy, does he agree with that? And he said yes. And his bill, of course, is not a bipartisan bill. And so the bottom line is that we all came to agreement that we were going to continue discussions in the way that I believe Speaker McCarthy described, which was agreed to by all of us in the room together. And hopefully we can come to an agreement. We don't have much time, but default is just the worst alternative. And the having a bipartisan bill in both chambers is the only way we're going to avoid default. Hakeem and I are committed to trying to get that bipartisan bill done.
It was a positive meeting. I thank the president for once again convening us. It was an open and an honest, but a very cordial discussion. We all agreed that the only path forward is to reach a bipartisan agreement anchored in common ground. We all agreed that default is not an acceptable option and must be avoided. And we all agreed that over the next few weeks, we have to proceed with the fierce urgency of now in order to make sure we can reach that bipartisan, common sense, common ground agreement so that we can protect the health, the safety, and economic well-being of the American people.
Your question? Yes, yes.
What is your specifics like strengthening work requirements and rescinding unsafe?
Yeah, we're not going to get into negotiations out here. We have to come to common ground. That's the only way this has ever gotten done. It has never gotten done with one party saying you have to do it my way. You have to get both parties in both houses together. Yes. Well, you'll know it when you see it, and that what that means is that we'll not sacrifice our values. They'll probably not sacrifice their values, but we'll have to come together on something that can avoid default. Default is a disaster. Full stop.
Well, Senator, make your proposal. The Republicans have made theirs. Make your proposal.
What a disaster default was.
Senator,
You're closer to a deal today than you were a week ago. You said it was productive.
Yes, I think it was as the leader said, it was a much more cordial meeting. There were honest and real discussions about differences that we have on a whole variety of issues, but it was all respectful, and that was a good sign as well. Okay? Do you want to say one thing?
It was
Difficult has it been? I know this is kind of new for you, but if both of you could speak to the challenge, because our commander-in-chief is a tough negotiator.
Well, President Biden has done an extraordinary job of bringing us together last week, setting in motion staff discussions that have been positive and productive over the last several days, and then bringing us back together to have another positive discussion with a clear path forward in terms of reaching an agreement, because default is not an option. Everyone agreed that that was the case. A default will be a disaster for the American people. It would trigger a job-killing recession. Default would crash the stock market and hurt the retirement security for millions of older Americans, and a default would dramatically increase costs on people all across the country. And it was a very positive development that everyone agrees we're going to work with the fierce urgency of now over the next week or two, reach an agreement, avoid any default, and continue our efforts.
Make your proposal. Democrats, make your proposal.
But one thing I want to say, what gave me the most hope, and there are a bunch of things, is that everyone, including the Speaker, agreed we need to be bipartisan. The idea of having a partisan bill we knew would get us nowhere, and everyone freely admitted that in the room. Last question.
Clarifying something that McCarthy said. He said the president appointed appointees or negotiators. What does that mean? Is it new staff? Are you getting?
No, well,
who are those people?
I'll let the president talk about that, but the bottom line is the bipartisan negotiations that we've had are going to continue, but there'll be a few additional players added to those. Thank you, everybody.
All right, that was the Democratic side of this. King Jeffries, of course, Chuck Schumer. You hear about both sides agreeing that no one wants a default. That's a gimme. No one wants a default. But they're miles apart on some of the key issues. For example, Chuck Schumer saying that we're moving toward bipartisan legislation that would have, signatures by Republicans and Democrats. That might be a Herculean leap. Republicans have their plan, Republican-only votes. Democrats have a plan they've been cooking up, Democrat-only votes. Never the two shall meet or find a balance here. That doesn't necessarily mean they eventually cannot, but time is running tight. It's about 2 weeks till this deadline you hear June 1st, so another couple of weeks away, when we're told we have no more money under the couch cushions and we're down to anywhere from our last $86 to $88 billion. Now, there's a lot of jostling around with that money and where it can be allocated and prioritized, much as average Americans are when they pay their bills and which ones they prioritize. Obviously, focus on the mortgage and the rent first, the utilities probably after that. You might let some other payments go, but you prioritize. That is what the government is doing on a steroid scale, if you will. Let's go to
Get on with it.
where this process stands, because Chad, it's all about time.